Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program.
Hello and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription, the podcast where we help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. I'm incredibly excited about today's guest. He is the founder and CEO of Yocto Agency. Please meet George Kapernaros. George, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Having me, Matt. And you got my name right, like almost nobody does, so kudos.
I appreciate that. I think it's just a little bit of just trying to pronounce the word or the letters that are right in front of you, but we all try to make. I'll just try to do the best that we can. The reason I'm so excited, George, to have you on is we did a podcast interview together a few weeks ago with me on your podcast. I love that discussion so much. For those of you listening, you probably don't realize, but there's often like issues with trying to schedule and timing and all this stuff. So George and I, because of stuff on my side and his side, have pushed this recording out a few times, and so I've had to wait for this conversation, George. So that's why I'm saying I'm excited. I'm excited to get into it because I really, really love some of your perspective on email. I think that within subscriptions, we so much talk about the platform. We so much talk about cancellations and all these other things. But in reality, the lifeblood of retention and the lifeblood of a subscription program is email and communication with SMS. So I'd love to start hearing from you, just like from a general view, a little bit about your background and how Yocto came to be.
Okay. I'm also excited to speak to you for what it's worth. I haven't told you, this is the first time you're hearing this, but lately you are showing up everywhere. Like everybody I speak to somehow. I was talking to the guys at Skion, like you were there. I was talking to Luke, you were there. So I'm also excited for what it's worth. In terms of Yocto, we are a relatively young business. We've been doing business as Yocto as of from September 2022. So it's less than 3 years. Now, my background stretches before that, obviously, but the business is relatively young. And I'd say, considering how young it is, we've done fairly well. We got invited to Klaviyo's Partner Advisory Council a little over our first year, basically. We have worked and still work with some pretty big companies, including the likes of Kilo Health, Better Me, Health, Miracare, Heights in the UK. Like those are brands that are very successful in the D2C / subscription space. And we've been blessed really to be working with them. Like people often ask, like, why do you guys do differently? Like what's special about you guys? Like, what's it that you do? And the true answer is that we just work with really good clients. And when you work with really good clients, you get the opportunity to be exposed to a very high level in-house teams, see a lot of data, and then in so doing, you just get smarter much quicker because you work with multiple companies, not one.
What do you think makes the difference between a good brand or not? Because yes, we're on the consulting side, and I've worked with tons of different agencies, and I know there's often, like, whether it's communication or expectation, there's often issues. But when you say like you work with really good brands, is it because of the quality of the product? Is it how organized they are? What do you think? And I'm asking this because maybe advice for people that are listening, like what does it take to be a good brand, to be successful with email?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's three things. Number one is, in my perspective, a strong focus on the product. You need to have a good product. And like the heuristic that I use is, would the founder of the company give their product to their grandmother? If the answer is no, then like probably something is off, right? So like, would you give this to your family? The second thing is they have to know what they're going to say no to, which means they have a strong brand. Because if you are like kind of doing everything, if you're trying to service everybody, then you don't really have a plan. You're just trying to make money, which is fine. I'm not judging this, but it's not the type of company that we want to be working with. An example that comes to mind, I'm going to give a shout out to our clients over at Health. Very successful company. One of the strongest teams that I've seen in my life. When we started working together, we had a lot of ideas in terms of on-site campaigns, like think pop-ups and offers for existing audiences and all that. And the founding team was always like, no, we don't want to do this. We know it might work, but it's not something that we think provides a good experience for consumers, and we just don't want to be doing this, even if it costs us money. That ability to say this is not for us is, to me, what makes somebody have a strong brand. And then the third thing, which ultimately might even be the most important, frankly, is a good understanding of math, like what is actually happening in the business.
Right.
Not just ROAS, not just Klaviyo attribution, but actually getting down into it, like have a solid grasp of unit economics and margins and all. And I mean, people often talk about this as if the in-house teams don't track this, and this is false because they always do track this to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the top teams are really watching their numbers like hawks, and they really know what they do, and they do it with intentionality. So I think those three things make somebody like a really good company to work with.
Well, those are great points. And as you're talking about the brands that say no, like I think it's funny because there are times where I get told no by a brand for something that I want to do, and so I might get a little frustrated, like, oh, this is the right play here, and yet often that actually does allow us to focus on what is most important for the brand and or at least what the brand feels is most important. And I'm thinking too about some of our clients, and some of our biggest ones are actually really good at saying no to stuff. That's actually how they've gotten to where they are and how they've grown to the size they are, is by saying no and not chasing every little thing and not getting distracted. And that can be tons of different stuff, right? Campaigns, it can be channels, it can be different stuff. You said something really, really interesting though, with the idea of like knowing your numbers. And it makes me think of a question that's come up recently that I'd love to get your feedback on, because I know you guys do work with a lot of subscription brands. You're getting into email strategy a lot. And that is the idea of like, do you look at email as revenue per send? Do you look at email as like a monthly margin that you're trying to drive towards? How do you view those numbers when you're looking at email? Because we've got Taylor Holiday in this space who's explaining it like, you need to know if you send an email, how much revenue do you get from that email? How much revenue are you trying to get in a month? Do we just need to break that down into a number of emails? Or is it, we're going to send 10 emails and we're trying to maximize the revenue per each one? Because I have a follow-up question that's really, really important with subscriptions specifically, but I'd love to get your take on how you view revenue and those metrics around campaigns like that.
So it's a very good question. I'll tell you what I think you should be doing in an ideal case scenario, and then I'll tell you what the reality of things is, because those two are not like the same thing always.
Right.
So what I think you should be doing is, first of all, not just looking at revenue, because revenue you can increase just by offering very large discounts. Like what you should actually be looking at are the actual business metrics. So net sales, removing discounts, removing all of that, minus COGS, like what is actually left after you remove the cost of goods sold, minus operating expenses, so that you know what are you actually contributing to the business in the grand scheme of things. Now, like that is how I think you should be measuring those things. And ideally, you shouldn't be measuring this on the first sale, but the downstream effect that you might be having also as a subscription company that retains customers over time. Because this is really important for the following reason. If you're calculating your value per customer, let's call it, on the first month, this limits your ability to advertise significantly than if you calculate it on the 12th month, right? Because over time, the value of its customer is going to go up if you retain some of them. So that's what you should ideally be doing. Now, the reality of things is that most clients don't allow this level of access to their agency. Mm-hmm. It's just something that most agencies never get access to. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is twofold. Number one, the agencies themselves don't want to do this because they either don't know how to navigate this, or they feel like they don't get paid for this, right? Like they just want to do emails on Klaviyo, that's it. They just want to do ads on Meta, that's it. They don't want to like bother with all of this. The other reason is because, frankly, there's a lot of bad agencies in the ecosystem, and the brands are like, you don't really know how to run a business better than I do. Having said all of this, I do want to encourage brands to expect more from their partners. I do want to see more conversations around these topics happening in the industry. And I do want us to be moving away from Klaviyo attribution or from, I don't know, revenue as a North Star, and moving more towards what are we actually contributing to the bottom line of the business. That's what I'd want. In terms of how we work specifically, because that's what you asked, we are, I would say, quite a bit different than most other agencies in the sense that we don't really do an audit initially. We do what we call a strategy activation. That's how we call it. And the strategy activation essentially is a call that we have with the client where we try to understand what's the number one metric, like the number one thing we can do to help them. And this might be, I don't know, reduce churn, whatever it is. And then we measure our success based on our ability to move that metric. So we are singularly focused on helping them achieve that original outcome. Once this is achieved, what we do is, of course, we create dashboards and we track all sorts of things. But originally, we try to focus on what's the number one thing that matters.
So Brandon could tell you like, hey, we really want to improve our repeat purchase rate, or we really want to improve our subscriber opt-in rate for one-time purchases, or we really want to improve our revenue per customer at this level. And then that's the metric that you guys start creating. That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it like that, but that does make a lot of sense because again, as you mentioned, good brands are going to have like a goal in mind other than necessarily if somebody were to come to you and say, hey, we just want somebody to run emails and hit our revenue metric, that might be a little bit of a red flag for you, right? Because there's not like a goal that they're...
I'll tell you exactly how it happens. And I'll tell you why because it wasn't like that before. How it happens usually is that the brand comes to the conversation and they have like a laundry list of things. They're like, we want to increase revenue. We want to do optimization after purchase. We want to reduce churn. We want to increase subscriptions. We want to do a loyalty program. We want to reduce spam rates. Actually, we are on spam. They have so many different things. And if you try to achieve all of those goals, you are going to get lackluster results. It's as simple as that.
It comes back to your no comment. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Is it comes back to your no comment. Is that you can't touch all those things. There's no person or agency that's going to touch all those things in the course of a month or two. You could over time, but you have to pick something to focus on. So the reason I asked that question, and I just love how you're talking about this, is because in my mind, I'm constantly trying to balance this idea of, and clients are asking me these same questions all the time. It's what do we do with subscribers from an email strategy standpoint? Meaning, if I don't send them anything because I don't want to spike churn, then just the revenue per subscriber once they're in there is all I get. But if I start sending campaigns, depending on when I send those campaigns, I can potentially increase the revenue from that cohort or those cohorts, but I also then have the risk of causing churn. So that's just this very interesting thing, because as you know, in email, brands are often not thinking about the fact that if I send too many emails to a list, I'm going to lose revenue. It's more about the more emails I send, I'm going to get more revenue. Maybe I burn out the list. That's the upside downside. But subscriptions is different. It's like the upside is more revenue, but the downside is I actually might lose more revenue because I've got churn. How do you think about that? How do you balance that when we're looking at a metric? Like if I say to you, the metric I want to do is I want to increase the profitability of my subscription cohort through email. That's my North Star metric. What's a general strategy, or how would you talk to that as an objective?
I think there's a common mistake that I see. I mean, the primary mistake is not do anything at all, which is what you said. Right. I think this is the worst. You should do something, right? That clearly it's the wrong thing to do. The other mistake is that you don't isolate that journey. So somebody subscribes and they're treated in the exact same way as somebody that did not subscribe. They receive all of campaigns. Right. They receive they receive browse abandonment emails, even though they just subscribe to something. So they receive messages about something else. I think this is the second biggest mistake. What I think you should do, and what I recommend people do, is try as much as possible to isolate this cohort, because it is a sensitive cohort. As you said, if cancellations go up, you are getting damaged, basically. So it does matter that you kind of like isolate them and treat them in their own way. Now, what do you do with them? I think what you want to do fundamentally is the following. You want to make sure they understand the value of the product. You want to make sure that they do consume the value of the product quickly. And you want to make sure that they do this consistently over time. What this really means is that we're thinking about long automations that could be spanning months.
Right.
The whole purpose of which would be to get them to see how their life is changing after they've subscribed to the product.
Right.
And to stop having thoughts like, do I really need this in my life? Is this really doing anything?
That is one of the biggest things, right? It's like the first opportunity in subscriptions to miss somebody is not getting them to adopt the product or use the product, right? The second time is you send a billing renewal too quickly where they have too much product and so they're going to cancel. But the final one is always a question of price and do I really need this? Like, is this really something that I need in my life? Is it really working? Is it really worth the cost? And every time you send a billing reminder or every time somebody sees a charge on their credit card, that's the questions they're going to be asking about that. I love how you said that. I had a great conversation with a brand at a conference recently, and that's kind of how I was trying to think about it. They had 70 or 80% of their business was subscriptions. And it's like, well, you have to think about that as a special cohort, as a special group, and a special experience. So I really like that. How would you address that with campaigns too? Because like the idea of talking to people about their product and that value and reminding them of that over time, 100%. At what point are you potentially upselling other products? Are you trying to cross sell or anything else? Like I know we've tested a lot of different things. It does depend brand to brand. From like, if you're looking at, I generally hate doing it immediately, right? You want to look at month 2 or 3 or beyond. I'm just curious what you've seen work or what your take on that would be.
I think, honestly, campaigns probably should be done very rarely when it comes to people that are active subscribers. And I think most of the work should be through flows. Now, of course, if you have a big audience base that you haven't touched in the past, then yeah, it would make sense. But for the most part, I would think in terms of flows when it comes to active subscription. I do want to say this. Actual campaigns, think, at least the way I think about it is the following. How can I get them to expand or magnify the original value proposition that they bought?
Right. That
would be how I would be thinking about this. And how can I reduce the friction towards doing this? An example of reducing friction, I believe you know very well, would be this very interesting technology that we all like to use lately called Zamo. That is something that does reduce friction.
Right.
So you either want to magnify the value or reduce the friction towards buying.
No, I love that. Okay. Yeah. One of the ways that we have been doing that a lot is inside like the upcoming billing reminder, right? That's already an email they're getting. It's sent on a flow basis. And then we're using Zamo to like embed potential like either upgrades or cross-sell opportunities. So I'm curious for you, do you see what are some common mistakes or some best practices that you guys like to employ when you're looking at billing reminder emails for subscribers? Do you have any tips in that area?
Well, the first tip for billing reminders is to not do them at the wrong time. You don't want to be sending billing reminders to people that have too much. So you want to always have the ability to get them like to pause it or like delay it, etc. So this is important. It's better to have this because otherwise they're going to cancel. You want to remind them always at every touch point the benefits of the subscription itself, because just because they bought doesn't mean that they will necessarily remember the benefits of what it is they bought. And you want to always give them an easy option to expand what it is that they bought, essentially like a cross-sell. So those are kind of some top of mind thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you guys approach doing like campaigns or flows, depending on how you structure it, for one-time purchasers to make them aware of like the value of a subscription, to get them to try to buy a subscription? Like, What's your general take or strategy on that?
I think this applies to basically every single brand that has a subscription, because usually the subscription has better financial terms than a one-time purchase. There's no subscription discount. There's no freebies that you might be getting through the subscription. It's just a worse deal for the consumer. So likely what is happening is that there is a trust gap. For whatever reason, they don't want to commit because they don't necessarily know if it's going to work for them. So from a messaging standpoint, I would say this is the main difference. You need to be focused more on explaining why this is going to work when everything else they may have tried didn't, and why it's in their best interest to give it a go over time, because only through consistent use over time, they're actually going to get the results that they're hoping for. So
would you lean into messaging like that, especially if, like, say they use SMS notification for subscriptions, right? Would you like lean into the messaging like, hey, we actually text you before your order processes and you can easily manage or control? Like, would you actually ever talk about the control related to the subscription? Because every brand says pause, skip, cancel anytime, right? Like everybody says that, right? But the ability to do that is actually in varying degrees depending on how they built their emails and their quick actions or their links and stuff like that. What do you think of a strategy like that, where somebody maybe is reluctant to try subscription and you want to say, hey, here's a GIF of how easy you get a notification, you can make changes like this kind of thing?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I think it's worth doing for sure.
Awesome. Are there any other tactics that you're seeing with like the brands that you work with on subscriptions related to email, whether that is how you're setting up flows, different offer structures, campaigns, anything that you can think of that you think would be valuable to the audience?
I think the one thing that I would encourage people to do more of is to try and humanize a little bit the subscription experience. So rather than think in terms of big discount, big banner at the top, 20% off, 5 bullet points, this is the subscription, buy, which is how most approach it, think in terms of having different sort of personas, if you will, after somebody subscribes, that are interacting with the subscriber. The best example of this that I can think of is everyday dose. If somebody wants to see how they do it, they can see how they do it very easily by getting on their list. They will send you messages through different personas, and they're going to have questions. It's interactive, it's reciprocal, which they then use to segment the content that they send to you. And it feels like almost like you're talking to a real person, which is actually, even though people might be realizing it's automated, it tends to get better engagement and it tends to get better results.
Are you seeing that from like pop-ups, like on the website where you're asking those questions, post-purchase, like surveys
within the emails themselves?
In emails, like people are able to engage, or they're basically triggering things that are causing them to get into a different segment? Okay.
Questions like, what outcome are you most excited for? Option A, option B, option C, and then the messaging adjusts depending on what you select. There's basically calls to actions that you click through the emails themselves.
I really like that. I feel like we could be doing more of that, especially like one client that's got like 3 different products with 3 different primary use cases. But depending on what you're buying, so we're already like triggering them. We're already segmenting them based off of what product they bought, but we're not asking like, what is the outcome related to that product? Because it is different. Each product has slightly different uses or use cases. And I agree with you. That's what I've seen be really successful in the past, is when we're talking like the most basic examples, like protein powder, right? Like, are you trying to gain muscle? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to train for like an endurance sport? And depending on those things, and I would say, kind of coming back to this question of no, like, I do think that is actually a great place to focus on subscriber experience, on humanizing people. And ultimately, it's not rocket science from like a technical setup, right? Like, or any type of these triggers. Don't overthink it. Just think about like, hey, if you're trying to lose weight by taking your protein powder, here are several emails that talk about how different people are doing that and successful in guides or in content information. Okay, no, that's really
one nuance here. I just want to add this because I think it might be helpful. Is The example that you brought up is perfect for this, is that people do change over time though. So like I might be looking to get slimmer during summer, but I might be looking to bulk up during winter, right? Like, so it's not just because I start like this, I'm going to be forever like this. So I would say what people should also be thinking is, how can I kind of refresh those custom properties that I might be collecting on the subscriber level? And like an easy way to do this would be to have some sort of type of experience that gets sent out every quarter and basically does a check-in with the consumer and asks, like, is this still true? Update your goals here because we want to be sending you relevant content.
Yeah. You could also be like just embedding that as a quick action survey inside like a 5th or 6th month billing reminder, or like you can time those to go up. Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right. You have to be doing those check-ins, especially if there's any type of product that has like successes that happen over time. Because coming back to your original point, right? You were talking about like it's really important to keep justifying to the consumer, and if you don't know what they're doing or what their goals are over time, then that you might be missing the point, right? Like telling somebody about how great it is at losing weight, but they've gone into a bulk phase training for their event, right? So exactly, it's a great point.
And also on the justifying the value of the product, I think this is just my observation. You might disagree, but I think as marketers, we're all being a little bit too enamored with our work, and we're thinking that we're kind of like the centerpiece of the consumer's life. But the reality is that we don't exist in a vacuum, right? So we are always competing with a subscription to Netflix, with doing something else, with not doing anything at all even.
Right.
So I think this also is something that we should be keeping in context.
This is something that's come up quite a lot this year for us with clients too, where when we're doing an onboarding series and we're trying to educate a subscriber about the product, and often a brand's like, well, we can't say that, we said that like 2 emails ago. And I'm like, you think that they remember what they read from your email 2 or 3 days ago? Like, no, if it's an important piece, we're going to be repeating it, reframing it. We're going to be showing them on all these different touch points because they really need to know that. So no, I think that's another great way to think about it. There's a lot of things to think about, and we often forget, like, what would you remember or would you see? You saw one email, you opened it. That's not often enough. For one time you asked for the survey response, it's not enough. If they haven't, you want to, there's an ability easily able to do follow-ups and stuff. George, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to share or talk about related to email strategy, email for subscription brands, anything at all?
I think you covered a lot of ground. The one thing that I do want to say, if you allow me a little plug, is that we are hiring at the moment. So if anybody is in the CRM space and wants to work with an agency that takes its work seriously, then please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have 3 positions open. I'd love to talk to you.
I love that. We'll get a post up on LinkedIn and X about this when we go live with that too. So it'll be a good way to tease it. I love it. Well, George, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is a great conversation. For everybody at home that wants to learn more about the work that George and his team are doing at Yocto, you can go to yocto.agency. I will have a link to that in the show notes. Also connect with George on, is LinkedIn, X both for you, or?
Just on LinkedIn. I should be active on X, but I'm not.
Yeah. I remember we've been messaging on LinkedIn. So, okay. Yeah, I'll have your profile on there as well. Thanks again for coming on the show, George.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
Absolutely. Well, that's another dose of subscription prescription. Stay tuned for next week's dose.
That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.